two scenarios. One is where you're playing an important team, and one where you're playing Pakistan.
I can tell you the tension in a Pakistan locker room, you can cut the tension like a knife.
Finals, India, Australia. India won all matches.
Brilliant catch, just with Bumless.
Australia comes in, 11-player team, plays like they're 22 players on the field, and they just take everyone by surprise.
When we have every win, I said this, by match 6, I was saying we're in trouble.
Who has been that one legend that you would say that I have never seen a man like him?
For sure, Dhoni is he for sure is that one person. He has real understanding of what is important and who is important, and he spends his time there. When you look at Dhoni, it reminds me of someone always says, what type of a person you want to be the type of person Tom Hanks would play in a movie.
Yeah. What are your views on IPL?
International players who are not playing a massive distraction. The RCB situation is very much what was happening in 2000 with the Indian cricket team.
Welcome to Unlock with Kunal Jaisingh.
Thank you very
And we're
much.
going to unlock a lot of details from you. I'm going to pick your mind to the T.
Perfect. Thank you very, very much. I was very excited that you invited me onto the podcast, and I can't wait to go into it. We scratched the surface behind the scenes, but let's dive into it.
Talking about cricket, let's get to cricket. I think that's one thing where India has really shown its might in the sporting world.
Yes.
And you have worked very closely with the Indian team and with the greats of the great, the legends in the cricket team. I want to understand what made you choose to work in this field. What was your brain thinking at that time?
My brain was not thinking anything. I was a young boy who wanted to play cricket in South Africa, and I grew up in the apartheid, so people of color could not play for the country. I had no other option, and I was not ready to leave sport. So I studied sports and exercise science, and I became a strength and conditioning and a high performance coach very early. I've been coaching professional athletes from the time I'm 19 years old. I've been in the setup from the time I'm 13 years old at a state level, international, national level. And at 18, when I decided to become a coach, in my very, very first year of academics, I was already the high performance director with the team at the moment was the KwaZulu-Natal Dolphins. They had Sean Pollock, we had Jonty Rhodes, and all of these guys were in there. Eldine Baptiste, Nixon McLean from the West Indies were part of it. We had Andrew Hudson, Errol Stewart. We had an exceptional team. That was the team that I started coaching. And I felt that, I got moved into that direction, leaning into the strength of cognition. I think one of my greatest abilities is to look at things from multiple perspectives. And I can balance technique, I can balance tactic, I can balance the body, the mind. I have a vast experience across different codes of sports, so I can pull learnings in from everywhere.
One question that always comes to me whenever I see someone achieving in their field, may it be cricket, may it be football, may it be any kind of sport or any kind of avenue in life, and when they are achieving, it always astonishes me to understand that what is the mindset that is going behind them that makes them stand apart. Because there are a lot of people trying, but then there's that few who actually break the mold and reach.
Absolutely.
Because there has to be that one X factor on them.
There is one X factor.
And I want you to throw some light on that, because I really want to understand what makes them stand apart mentally.
So the difference between good and great is got nothing to do with equipment, money, technique, or anything like that. The difference between good and great has everything to do with the narrative, the reframing. Now, to put more context to what we're talking about, if you're the most successful athlete in your sport, you're probably experiencing 30% of success. If you're an average athlete, you're experiencing less than 15% of success. But 15% means you're still relatively successful as the world would know you in terms of how you're making it. But 15% of success means you're dealing with a lot of failure. Okay. Now, one of the biggest deterrents when it comes to failure is the narrative that we play in our mind when we experience failure. Okay, so what do you tell yourself? That narrative is the X factor.
How did you get to the Indian cricket team?
Firstly, I got to the Indian cricket team in 2003. I was a technical analyst. And because I was working at state level in Durban, John Wright, who was the coach at the time, he wrote to the coach I was working with, elderly man by the name of Phil Russell. He says, I'm bringing the Indian team there. I'm looking for a technical coach or an analyst who understands all of the conditions in South Africa really well. And Phil put me forward. He says, you take him because he's been my understudy. With Phil, I studied grounds. I knew curatorship. I knew how to prepare a pitch. I understood conditions. I could measure moisture. I understood every single variable because my first mentor wasn't a coach. My first mentor was a curator at a ground. So he taught me everything about how to read pitches. So Phil recommended me to John, and that's how I joined the team. And my job with the team was really to analyze pitch conditions and help John determine whether to play the extra seamer, whether to play bowlers who would hit the deck harder or those who would pitch it up and swing it. We had Zaid Khan, Ashish Nehra who would swing bowlers. We had Javagal Srinath who would hit the deck a little bit. And then we had two spinners. We had Harbhajan who would turn it and we had Kumble who would skid on. And based on conditions, my job was to determine, who should we play in which conditions.
Well, that's the role of a technical coach.
Well, yeah.
What exactly is the role of a technical coach?
Well, in that particular role, that's exactly what I was doing, analyzing pitch conditions and doing that. A technical coach could be very, very different. He could be working on technique. He could bring in different strategies into play. It all depends on what skill you're complementing with the head coach in there. I've done that role where I was only looking at biomechanics. I did that role where I was developing strategy. With Phil, when I was working, a lot of things were strategy. So, for example, interesting stories. Today, when you look at cricket, and you see the players who are not playing, you see them wear a vest.
Yeah.
Right. Back when I was with the team from 1999 to say 2004, 2005, that rule wasn't in place. So we used to have 11 people on the field. You'd have a 12th man, and then you'd have about 4 other people in the change room. And I knew, as a psychologist, if the game got really tight and the pressure was dialed up, the batsman who was striking, if he scanned the ground, he would be very difficult for him to determine who's inside the rope and who's outside because there was no vest. So in the last 2 overs, I used to send all my players to just stand at different positions of the boundary so that the batter didn't know actually who was in and who was out. Was it cheating? Maybe. It was bending the rules because there was no rule in place around that. So we did that. This is why they're vests today, because we exploited the rule back there and we won 5 championships in 4 years.
Yeah.
We also created, I created another piece of equipment because I created a batting pad because I realized one thing, there was no Hawkeye. There was no action replay, The umpires were left to their own accord for most of the time.
Right.
And when the ball hit a pad, based on where it bounced, the umpire was making an assumption of whether it hit him straight or not. Very simple. They put this together themselves. So I said, how can I F with their mind a little bit as such? So we created pads where it wasn't rounded in front. It was an edge.
Oh.
Right. So every time it hit the pad, it would shoot off to fine leg or third man, and they would automatically think it didn't strike him in front. And
nice.
stuff like that. That there.
Was that legal?
No, the cricket board, we managed it with 1 game only. The cricket board banned that as well.
Sure.
But, I'm giving you all these stories because this is what a technical coach does. We look at ways in which to bend the rules. And I keep getting called to advise and mentor young sports scientists or people in sport. And I tell them, if you're going to be an advantage to your team, you need to know every single rule inside out. Yeah, because your advantage is not going to come from applying a rule. It's going to come from knowing where to bend the
rules.
As the Japanese say, you have to know where the bamboo bends. And that's the secret, actually.
True. What are your views on IPL?
IPL is a great tournament. It's a phenomenal tournament. I think it's done a world of good for international cricket, Indian cricket. I definitely think, and I say this very vocally a lot, is the biggest distraction or the biggest deterrent for more Indian talent coming out are the international foreigners.
Yeah, you've spoken about this.
All the time. International players who are not playing a massive distraction, because nothing that happens in that environment impacts their selection at a national team anywhere else. So they're just partying, they're just distracting. And I've seen youngsters who come in there training for 3-4 months, preparing mentally, trying to be in the right ecosystem, because this is make or break for them, right? And you're putting them in an ecosystem with a person who just doesn't care. How fair is that? So I've always doubled down and said, 14 years down the line, the number of foreigners we have in this league should be reducing quite significantly.
It should be, because it's the Indian Premier League, and
It's the Indian Premier League. We should not kick them out. We should reduce it with the fact that and there's no justification to have them there. We're already number one test team. We're number one in international cricket. We're the number one association. We're the biggest contributor financially to the sport. We've got 30-odd domestic teams. We've got multiple other leagues. There's absolutely no justification for them to be there except to make money. And do we have the best interests of our junior players who see this as the main avenue or access to the national team? Are we being fair to them?
absolutely, because earlier there used to be Ranji and the domestic teams, and now IPL is also a way to make it to the big league.
It's become de facto domestic cricket. And
Yeah,
the case,
earlier it was only Ranji.
well, the case in point that IPL is de facto domestic cricket is that Virat's played Ranji from 2012, 13 years later, and Rohit 2015. In no other country in the world would an international cricketer not be allowed to even play one domestic game in a season, let alone get a decade in without playing with his domestic team. It would never, ever, ever happen anywhere else in the world, except India. I was shocked when I read that data point, absolutely shocked, and that means nothing, because, even if they failed, and some of them did fail, their name is in the national team to go the following week.
Yeah.
So, we really have to rethink the system.
83 was something which I have heard so much, and I knew that was the impossible converted to possible. Correct. Because at that time, everything was against India. And then there was 2003, personally for me, because there has been wins and losses before 2003. But in 2003, I feel there was a sweet spot of some of the greats and some of the future greats, which is today.
Correct.
So at that time, the sheer talent that was present in the Indian cricket team, it's like a bull raging, and we're just waiting for which bull might just be the outlier and take it ahead.
I mean, 2003, the team motto in that year, in that tournament for us, was now or never. You had Javagal, you had Ganguly, Sehwag, Sachin, Rahul, who were kind of stepping away. And then you got Harbhajan, you had Kaif, you had Parthav Patel, Ajit Agarkar coming into the fold. It was a beautiful mix of energy. John Wright did something absolutely genius. He appointed Yuvraj Singh as a batting coach. He appointed Ashish Nehra and Zahir Khan as bowling coaches, and he appointed Mohammad Kaif as a fielding coach.
Yeah.
And in the team meetings, Ganguly didn't speak. These three boys spoke. They decided the plan, they evaluated how well we executed the plan, and they spoke. And I keep telling everyone that a strength of a team is directly proportional to the vocality of the junior players in that team.
And all other teams are anyways reading the seniors.
Exactly.
They know, okay, this is what's going to happen if Virat comes in. This is what's going to happen if this one comes in. The people who they do not have data on is the newcomers.
They don't have, and it's not even about data. It's just that, yes, you don't have data, but senior players set up the win and junior players push it over the line.
Over the line, yeah.
No, this is just the formula.
This has been one line which you have really lived by.
I'm telling you the fact. You go to any single, you look at football, you look at cricket, you look at any sport, the seniors will set up the win. Something special from a junior will push it over the line. The same happened with Australia there as well,
Yeah.
and we did everything. So Sachin and Sehwag didn't lose that game for us. It was that no junior stepped up. The seniors did what they had to, and stuff like that.
How was it like working with Sachin? Because I really want to understand what was going in that gentleman's mind constantly, knowing that he is at a certain position, there is certain responsibility, whether he be the captain or not. There is a certain sense of responsibility that you feel.
For sure. With respect to, Kunal, with respect to 2003, some people know this, not everyone does, is that on the very, very first practice, we were in Boland, in Pal. We were going to play Holland in there. And it was 2 days before the opening ceremony. We were doing our very, very first practice session. So Sachin gets there, puts his pads on, walks in first to bat. And we had these bowlers that would come from schools. So we had a strappy Dutch boy who came, young guy, very, very nervous. We gave him a new ball. First ball, he runs up. First ball, super nervous, he bowls a bouncer that goes flying over Sachin's head. So John Wright sees this and he walks up to this kid. He says, darling, just push it forward. Just push it forward. You know? Let them just feel the ball on the back. So he says, okay. And he goes back, takes his new ball again, and he bowls. And he's really trying to pitch it forward again. And he pitches at a really good length. And Sachin tries to go forward and play a forward defense, which was the shot to play. But there was a wet spot on the pitch, right? And the ball hits that wet spot and it shoots straight up and it hit him in the helmet, right? So Sachin takes his gloves off. He says, I'm not batting. And he walked out, right? So John Wright comes to me, gives me a bag of balls. He says, do me a favor, just take Sachin on the side there. Just throw some balls for him. So I threw balls to him for the entire practice, 3.5 hours. We worked on every single shot. At the end of that practice, he goes to John. He says, I don't want to face bowlers again. For the rest of this World Cup, Shayamal will only throw to me. And that's what I did for 8 weeks. For 8 weeks, all I did as the other technical coach, other job, was look after Sachin. We went to practice together. After he did, he batted. He hit more balls than any other cricketer in that entire World Cup. It does not surprise me that he was man of the series. You know, we worked on every single thing through the lens of the people we are facing with. And, you know, he was, I think the thing that stood out for me is he's one of the most patient people. He knows all I need to do is just stay here. If I stay here, I will win. He knows this. Right. And that is the one most powerful lesson. If anyone wants to learn anything, the lesson to learn from Sachin is if you stay in the game, you will win. Right. If people get him out, everyone's losing. And he knew that. And all he did for the first 10, 15 minutes, he didn't even care whether he scored or he just stayed there. And it gets to a point you can actually see in practice when I'm throwing to him. I knew minute 1, minute 2, minute 3, I had to get him out because we used to have this competition in the nets to try to get him out. We had these imaginary fields. And there was a moment which was anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes. In one ball, it just clicks, it switches, the brain just switches, now you're done. When that brain switches, your opportunity is gone. He's now, every single ball is coming square off the middle of his bat. You know, the window of opportunity is done. You know,
He stayed long enough.
he stayed long enough.
got
It was
comfortable
between
with the
10 to
field.
15 minutes. He's seen it all. You know, now 10 to 15 minutes in a practice pitch could be 25 minutes in the game because of the number of balls we're facing. But there's that moment where you can literally see
That you're locked in.
that I'm done. It's now
It's his game.
it's his game. It's entirely up to him. You know, I can't do anything right. He can do something wrong.
What made Sachin so different from everyone else who was from his era?
Correct.
What made him stand out? What was that one X factor or two X factors that made Sachin Sachin?
I think the thing that makes Sachin Sachin is that Sachin delivered at big moments. Right. Now, generally, people who deliver at big moments have a phenomenal amount of conviction in their ability to execute, and that conviction comes from practice. But it's also very fortuitous because you have to be in a moment where that matters. I spent a lot of time working with Lance Klusener, and I always criticized Lance to say, buddy, you play the game into a situation only you can win it from. He did that from the longest time, right? You know, but they do that. You know, it's fortuitous that they get the game to a situation or that the game is in a situation where only you can do it. And then you back the skill to be able to execute at that moment. So Sachin being Sachin is a byproduct of maybe being in the right place at the right time with the transition, having the skill set to execute, and finding yourself in positions where, you know, if I step up, you know, something amazing is going to happen. And, you know, Virat is in that position. Dhoni finds himself in that position, but they have the skill set to complement that.
I have seen Dhoni being the calmest when he knows all hell is going to break loose.
Yeah.
And that moment also, he's calm, he's at the wicket, he's not being aggressive, he's not putting pressure on his team, and he knows, okay, we have maybe lost a game, but we have not lost the war.
Correct.
And I really feel that as a leadership quality is something that every captain or every player should take, because every player is a leader in his own way.
Yeah.
And Virat also is someone who is the person who complemented Dhoni well by being so, what's the word I'm looking for? So consistent and so dedicated in his talent.
Yeah. You know what? What is it that senior people do in an environment is Dhoni does this. I saw John Wright doing this at times. And uh, they make you realize also very, very quickly, and I'm sure Dhoni realizes it, that at the end of the day, we're playing a game.
Yeah.
That's what it is. It's a game. We can win it, we can lose it, but it's a game. There are a lot of things out there that are way more important. You know, he also has that mentality of armed services. He understands what the struggle is. He understands humility. So he's able to really put things in perspective. The second other thing that I was telling someone when we talk about good to great is great people have a lot of checks and balances before they allow someone into a room or onto their team. But when they get there, they trust them as the expert in that. Right. So Dhoni really and truly doesn't question why you're there. And he trusts and he backs your ability to do it. And he knows, okay, even if you get it wrong, every time you've got it wrong, you've got one step closer to getting it right the next time. You know? Now, there are two types of greats that I work with. You know, I spent a little bit of time. A lot of people ask me about Mr. Bachchan. You know, there was a time when 5, 6 years, every single morning, I would meet him at his home and we'd train together and do this. And
What were you doing with Mr. Bachchan? I really want to tap into that.
so Mr. Bachchan,
if you can speak about it.
I was managing a lot of his training, a lot of his rehab. You know, we had a few injuries that we were managing, things like that. This was the thing. He came to me when I founded a business called Heal. Abhishek's a very dear friend. I manage all Abhishek's sports teams earlier on, Chennai, Jaipur, all of these things. And as a result of that relationship, he brought me in to say, you know what, can you help my dad? Because we know he's had a few accidents and surgeries and stuff like that, and every now and again they flare up. So I was taking care of the physical rehab and the injury management for him. But you know, like Mr. Bachchan, like a Dhoni, like a Sachin, like all of these greats, puts in a phenomenal amount of practice in everything. But I noticed something, you know, I've worked with a fair bunch of greats across fields, and there are two types. There's a type of person who knows they're great, right? But when they walk in the room, they want you to know they're great. You know, so their behavior is reminding you, is forcing you to remember how good they are. And then there's a type of great who knows they're great, and they know that the 10 seconds you spend with them in the room could change your life.
So they make the 10 seconds
About you. They make the 10 seconds about you. And I've seen this distinctly so many times in my life. You know, and this for me is so subtle and so nuanced that you have to be there. You have to observe these people to really understand that. And the second type of that greatness comes from really and truly from this real confidence in your ability and your knowledge and and to really trust who you are. You know, Dhoni exemplifies that second type of greatness in many ways.
in the cricket world. Out of all the countries that you have been with, talking about cricket teams, yeah? Out of all the countries that is, who has been that one legend that you would say that I have never seen a man like him?
Never seen a man like him. I mean, you know, my career started off in South Africa. And I'll tell you one thing about South Africa is that everyone who played professional cricket also had full-time jobs. Right? So my exposure was related particularly to those. And there are a few names that I'll mention who, you know, that come to mind besides the pros that you know of, the Jonties, the Sean Pollocks. There were people like Errol Stewart, who also played, he kept wickets, he played for South Africa. Andrew Hudson, the opening batsman for South Africa. These people would wake up in the morning, practice 3 hours, and then go and have a full-time job, and then come back in the afternoon and practice 3 hours. And the character with which they held both these roles was so magnificent. It was really, really, you know, humbling in some shape and form. In India, when I worked there's some exceptional leaders, but they're only doing cricket. How are we straddling all of these other aspects of life, these things that I'm still yet to see? And when I look at someone, to answer your question, I'm looking at a well-rounded person.
Absolutely.
Who is able to hold that family, able to hold a job, able to give back to community, able to succeed in sport, able to also maintain a level of equanimity with everything. This is what we're looking for. This is the type of
Who's
role
that one
model.
person for you?
One person
In India?
I mean, in India,
Like the things that you mentioned for me would be Dhoni.
for sure, Dhoni is, like I said, I've not spent too much time, but he for sure is that one person. I think he comes the closest to that, in being really grounded, really humble, giving back, having multiple roles, not choosing to, I feel like he never chooses the limelight, he's thrust into the limelight. In fact, I feel like he's deflecting it. I feel he has real understanding of what is important and who is important, and he spends his time there. So yeah. Like when you look at Dhoni, it reminds me of someone always says, what type of a person you want to be the type of person that Tom Hanks would play in a movie.
Yeah.
Because if you look at every character he plays, is really a 5-star exemplary human being.
Absolutely.
So, and Dhoni is that for sure. Yeah.
There's been a lot of chatter in the news. Let's get to that about present here. And there's been a lot of upheavals that have happened in the cricket board right now.
Yeah.
India's performance in Australia has been something that was unexpected. And BCCI has come out and, like thrown a bunch of caveats, diktats that have come out. I want to understand, does that really motivate the team? Or does that actually take away from the team,
The problem with the Indian cricket team is that every single thing becomes news. Things that shouldn't even be in the media or shouldn't even be public are becoming public. So these sets of rules and caveat, even if the management felt that we want to put this in place, there should have been a channel with which it got in. We should have said, okay, we call Gambhir, we call Sharma, we said, what, we've seen these things. We think that if we implement these things, it'll help. Then on the first day when they meet at practice or a training camp or they travel, that management communicates it to this, and no one should have wind of this at all. This is healthy communication and healthy decorum.
Absolutely.
Teams break down when players learn something through the media. And historically, what I've seen is that there's too much privilege in the media. Too much. We're exposed to too much of information that we shouldn't really do. And the ramifications of that is, yes, your newspapers will sell and your social media will sell, but it's breaking the core.
the team spirit?
The team spirit. It's breaking that down. It's fragmenting that at a real core level. So this is the big problem. Now, whether we go into each one and say, what, this is correct, this isn't correct, I'm sure when you read it, you're surprised that some of those were rules because you would have expected that to be in place.
Yeah.
This is just the dynamic of how our Indian team sort of operates.
And I'm sure this must be happening in every country and every cricket board across the world. It's just that they do it under the wraps. What's your end goal? Your end goal is to get the best out of the team.
Correct.
And if you can implement that in a more subtle, a more compassionate manner, the taking the seniors and getting their confidence and saying that, hey, let's slowly make this a pattern with how we function.
100%.
Rather than it being like, hey, from now onwards, tuck, 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 tuck. Human brain saying, you know what, hold on. Don't go machine gun blazing on me.
Yeah. No, you're 100% right. And you got to feed that in. Like, for example, I'll give you another example from 2003.
Yeah.
When we got in there, Sachin, for example, had an ankle injury early in the tournament in there. Wasn't so much an injury that caused him pain, but he needed to get strapped. So as soon as we got at the ground, we went to the bus, he would go and he'd get all his strapping done. And sometimes it would take a while and the warm-up would start and he would come in 5-10 minutes a little bit later because he was with the physio, And we noticed that when he was there from the start, the energy in the warm-up was significantly different, right? So there was no rule to implement. It was just, we picked this up. We spoke to the physio, we spoke to the team, we said, okay, how can we align things? Or if he needs a little bit extra time, how can we do a little team huddle or a psych exercise or something that doesn't involve physical movement, wait for him to come, because we've seen such a powerful impact. Now, this is the right way to do about it, is to understand what is the impact of what we're doing and how. So with all of these rules, more importantly, I would be very keen to understand who noticed what was going wrong before you needed to put this rule in place. You know, like if you put something in place, it's to correct something. What was actually wrong that you were trying to correct? You know,
Just that they had a line of bad performances.
a line of bad performance, because like I said, you and I are seeing the outcome. We have to distinguish it. Was it a bad win or was it a good loss? You know, once we start to understand that, and the best people are the coach and captain to understand that, to determine that, you know, did we practice enough? Were there no distractions? Were we completely aligned? Did we understand pitch conditions? What could we have done? Was it just a simple difference between strategy and execution? You know, we had a game plan. We needed to pitch the ball 10 feet in front of the popping crease. Unfortunately, we missed it 4 out of 6 balls. There's nothing wrong. The strategy was great. We just couldn't execute. You know, this happens in sport.
The World Cup that happened, India won all matches.
Correct.
Finals, India, Australia. Everyone was very confident that India has had a lossless victory streak till now, and we're gonna ace it and we're gonna take the cup home. Australia comes in, 11-player team, plays like they're 22 players on the field, and they just take everyone by surprise. And Virat and Rohit started getting a lot of slack from the fans and the viewers. So is it right that they are getting slack for that, or do you think that they took it a little casually, thinking that, oh, we are so senior now?
Firstly, I don't think they take it casually. I don't think that they definitely come in with the mindset of, I'm going to be casual or be lackadaisical about that. For sure not. You know, could they do different things in preparation? The answer is always yes. Could they try to become fitter and more in a better position? The answer is yes. But fitness doesn't directly produce results in cricket.
Absolutely.
Okay, so for every coin, there's two sides to it. I definitely think if we've understood, like you've very clearly seen in some of the results, that where these two people are in a good mental health and are doing well, the team does well. So the question should be, what should we do to keep them in that great state? You know, and how can we ensure that? You know, does it mean giving them more responsibility, or does it mean taking responsibility away from them? You know, what does it mean to keep them in a good mental health?
And that could be specific to each.
Specific to each is very, very different, you know, like 100%. And once we understand, you know, what can keep them in good mental health, then we're giving them the best opportunity to thrive. Very, very important. Okay. And what happened in the World Cup, you gave a beautiful example, Australia. Australia had 2 losses in that World Cup. There were 2 times when they put a good team down and results weren't there, so they had to go back to the drawing board. When we have every win, I said this, you know, by match 6, I was saying we're in trouble here because we're going to the knockout without ever being tested. You're right. Now, the ramifications of being tested in the round robin versus the knockout are completely different. Now, if we get tested and we don't have a contingency plan, we're done. Then we got right to the final and we still haven't been tested.
Yeah.
And this was really playing on and troubling me as well because, you know, it's not just about being tested. It was that the middle order needed to know what it felt like to step up. At that point in time, they hadn't. You know, we got to that point where they were really and truly not in a position where they had to lean in and step up, or a different contingency, because the psychology is very different. So that really concerned me. Australia were in that position. You know, Australia have also have this beautiful way of constantly bouncing back because they know how to test themselves in various systems.
Yeah.
Okay, so coming back to Rohit and Virat, you know, I really don't ever like to see them getting any flack and blame. I think, you know, because it's unjustified.
I'm with you on this because I just feel like, hey, it's a bad patch. Everyone has gone through it.
100%.
There's not been one cricketing phase from Gavaskar to Sachin to anyone when they have not been through a bad patch.
Yeah. And
It's just that now social media is so active and so rampant that it's in your face.
why are we always looking for scapegoats is the
Exactly.
question. Like, you know, even if we win, You're looking at someone's performance. You're looking at this. It's a team sport. In a team sport, some people have good days, some have bad days. And the other thing I always highlight to the media is for every minute that an Indian player is practicing, his opponent is putting in that same minute.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So if everyone's doing the same quantum of work and everyone's at the same skill level and everyone's at the same fitness level, why are we expecting all results to always fall on our side? Why can't we, with decorum, sometimes give credit to the opposition for having played a great series, and we come back saying, okay, listen, Australia wasn't great for us, right? But every time we look for an excuse, it's disrespectful to our opponent because we're discounting the work that they've done. We make it seem like it was luck, but it wasn't. They worked really, really hard. And one of the best examples, I spent 6 years traveling on the ATP tour with Sanya, with Mahesh, with everyone. And one of the best examples is Rafa Nadal. When Rafa Nadal was ever, you can go onto YouTube, look at it, every time he was beaten, and in the press conference, they asked him anything, right, about himself, even if he was injured, he would always say, I lost. I don't want to talk about anything. He played a great game. He never gave a reason to deflect from what his opponent did. Because he said it's absolutely disrespectful. Injuries are part of sport. Poor performance is a part of sport. All of these things are part of sport. And when I talk about this here, I am deflecting from the work that he did, and that is unsportsmanlike.
Two scenarios. One is where you're playing an important team, and one where you're playing Pakistan. What is going on just before the match in the locker room, in the players' minds, and how are they viewing this differently, these two matches differently?
I can tell you the tension in a Pakistan locker room. I've been fortunate to be in a locker room with the Indian cricket team during the World Cup when we played Pakistan at Centurion. And I've also was in the Indian football team when we played Pakistan as well. And I can tell you, you can cut the tension like a knife. That's how much of tension there is. And it's because we have amplified this up. This sports battle now seems to represent a battle between these two nations on every front. And it's so unfair. It's so unfair to the athlete. If whether it's Gukesh playing a chess match against Pakistan or Neeraj Chopra losing to Pakistan, but why do we bring in geopolitics with everything onto the sports field? The athletes are not thinking, and it's undue pressure. We are sabotaging their chance of winning because we're bringing in pressure that is unnecessary. Imagine every single day if you walk into your office and you have to make a pitch and someone tells you this is the most important pitch of your life because my great-grandfather tried to do this and he lost to this guy here, and they give you a whole bunch of narratives that layer on there. You're going to feel really deflated.
Absolutely.
And that's what we do every single time. So our athletes are exceptionally professional. They're professional in how they prepare. They're professional in how they think about it. We've got the best support staff. We've got a phenomenal selection team that's highlighting them. But I definitely feel that sometimes the narratives that we put out there don't help their cause.
But does that also creep into the locker room to the
It
players,
does. It
or
does.
are the players like, "Hey, I'm playing a team"?
No, we try not to let it creep into the locker room, but it's very difficult to not let it creep into the locker room. We're not speaking about it, but it's very difficult to leave the tension at the door.
Somewhere in the back
when
of their
everybody's
head,
talking
in the
about
back of their head, they know what they're when they enter the
it.
field.
Why do they know? They know because we are making it a big deal. And what's really amazing is Pakistan could be 7th in the test ranking as Australia 1, but it's viewed completely differently.
Yeah.
In a highly optimized team, okay, everyone is mutually accountable to each other. Right? So it's not me leading the team or you doing something. We are mutually accountable to each other. I would like for us as a sporting nation to see ourselves as one team, to see how administrators are mutually accountable to players, players are mutually accountable to media, media is mutually accountable to the team. We are one team. We are not different organizations that are analyzing things differently. If we're in the same organization, if we're in the same team and one of our teammates didn't do well, we wouldn't stand on his head. We would find a way to lift him up. And we need to start bringing this energy and this ethos to the table.
Very true. I've always had this this question as to when you're on that field, how do you block out the noise that is there? Because you're like 22 players on the field, but there's around 100,000 plus people in the stands, and everyone's shouting.
Yeah, it's not so much the noise. It's the reality of the situation. You know, that is the noise. The noise is not the people. The noise is the noise in your own head that this may be a World Cup final, or this is an IPL qualifying game, or a playoff game, or there's only 6 runs in 2 balls. That's the noise. The noise is not what they're making. So noise is very, very relative to each of us. Some people can hone into a particular thing, and that becomes the most important thing. Some people can completely block things off. So it's very relative to how our brain processes it. But for a professional athlete who's highly dialed into that moment, the noise is the reality of the situation and how we're going to deal with what comes next. It's not there. That's the least of their concerns.
How important is spirituality, whether it be whatever you're following, spirituality, yoga, to help you maintain a positive mindset in your game and to keep you locked in?
In the Bhagavad Gita, they say there are 5 reasons for success. So you have to be the right person for the job. You have to be in the right place. You have to have the right tools to execute your job, and you have to put in the right amount of hard work or effort in there. And it says these 4 are in your control. And there's a 5th element, which they call an invisible energy, luck, destiny, whatever. This is something that happens that you had absolutely no role to play in, that puts you in the right place, that creates the opportunity, that, creates the scenario, or someone noticing you, or whatever. You had no clue. This all comes together to manifest in your success. And it goes on to explain that, ego is a person's inability to recognize the invisible energy in their success. And this is the first thing I teach all athletes, because I tell them, irrespective of how much we work and how much we play and how much we do, there is an invisible energy that helps you. We have to pay our due respect to it. And when you start to give credit to something that you've not done anything to that's helping you on your journey, it's very humbling. Right. So that's humility. Humility is the ability to recognize it. So spirituality is something that's very, very important to how I coach, to how I teach people. And I keep reminding them this, because once it humbles you, humility is also the foundation of learning. Only a humble person can ask various people for questions. Only a humble person sees himself as a student of the game and is willing to learn from everyone else. So spirituality is, in essence, the core of how you grow as a person in your art towards mastery.
That was deep. That was deep. How important is nutrition just before the game? Is it expected of them to say something which is light on their stomach so that they can be?
Yeah, I mean, they would never say something, and we would not cater something that's really, really unhealthy and bad. But nutrition plays a critical, important role. Research has shown us that within 15 minutes of eating something, it starts to impact your neurobiology. So what we try to do is we try to bring in a lot of healthy fats, and we try to bring in proteins that stabilize the blood glucose. Because once you start to consume a lot of carbs, then you have a dopamine effect, and you'll need to crave a lot of it. So if you're batting for 30 minutes, that's longer than a carb spike would naturally be. So which means that you're going to experience a dip after 25 minutes. So what we're trying to do is bring foods in that stable blood glucose so that you can stabilize your neurobiology and you can have focus over that there.
And what are some of the
So
foods?
it's basically the macros are proteins and fats. This is what we predominantly try to get in there, or we try to get complex carbohydrates in there. And obviously we are constantly monitoring hydration. So we weighing the players as soon as they come in, we weigh them at halftime, whatever water loss there is, we try to get that in the form of electrolytes. We're doing all sorts of things like this.
Interesting. What is the role of steroids? Is there a role
So
of steroids?
steroids are obviously banned. They're not allowed in any locker room. We don't use them.
Not in the locker room, but in general.
Well, steroids are banned in and out of the locker room. So if someone is prescribing them, then you really don't want to work with them. And there is no room for performance enhancing drugs in sport. It shouldn't be spoken about. It shouldn't be tried. It shouldn't even be mentioned anywhere, because it's not just performance enhancing through the lens. They have massive detrimental effects on your organs.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask about, because the short-sightedness of steroids is, okay, you might perform a little better now, but the long-term effect of that is very detrimental.
Correct.
And being caught with it is even more detrimental to your career.
Right.
But I'm sure there's some kind of usage that is there, or it's not there at all.
It's difficult for me to say because I don't have exposure to it and I don't work. No one's gonna walk up to me and ask me what performance enhancing drug can I take. That's not a conversation I would entertain.
Right.
If you're working with someone who's entertaining that conversation, then there lies your fundamental problem. That person just doesn't have your best interest at heart.
You know why I'm asking you this question? It's not to just know this. It's if there is a future athlete that is watching this podcast,
Yeah.
and they're young, and there's a lot of chatter around them. The reason I'm asking these kind of questions is to help them understand
Yeah.
that don't do it.
Yeah. The reason, like I said, if anyone's bringing up the subject in your ecosystem, you're in the wrong ecosystem. You're working with the wrong person. You have to get away from there. Because sport is a pure meritocracy. It's a byproduct of hard work, hard training, all of that. There are lots of supplements we do use that can help recovery, help strength building that are completely illegal. Your branched chain amino acids, your L-glutamine, your L-carnitine, for example. We use a lot of Brahmi, ashwagandha. We can even use natural things like cordyceps to raise energy. And there's a whole bunch of stuff, that we can start to use. Going into steroids and anabolics where they bring an abnormal effect to the muscle is very, very dangerous. You predispose yourself to a lot of risk and a lot of organ damage in the same place. So if someone's bringing up this narrative, I don't advise you even move down that line and do it. When I worked in the Pro Kabaddi League, when a player got injured, and the first couple of years, I was capturing a lot of data because we're having a high level of ACL incidents, and one of the things to let you know how bad the situation is, like a player will get injured and the next morning he's gone, he's not even with the team, he's gone back to his village to see his own doctor, what that guy gives him, how he gives him, he doesn't. The player will literally tell you, don't worry, I got it under control. I'll see you in 3 days. Whether he comes, whether he doesn't come, we have no idea. This will never happen in any other sport, But this level of unprofessionalism only exists because we as a sporting nation have not evolved to that level, And we don't put a high amount of emphasis on even data. Like I remember even in the Pro Kabaddi, there was a year when I told them, they were changing our mats that the players played on, and we had mat densities of about, I think, 9 millimeters, and we were making it 11 millimeters, which meant more shock absorption. And I kept telling them that these guys play on mud the whole year round. The responsiveness of mud is very different to the responsiveness of foam.
Yeah.
If we increase the density by 2 millimeters, we increase the risk quite significantly. No one interested in this data, and exactly that happens. We had in that year the incidence of ACL, which are career ending for Kabaddi players, increased by almost 20% in that particular season. So, sports science is very, very important. Paying attention to the data is very important. But I feel that the right decision makers are not getting access to the right information to make things, to make correct decisions. And unfortunately in sport, only the athlete suffers. So the athlete, we need to fast track his education where he understands fully what the ramifications of every decision are.
True. And this was an eye-opener for me that whatever you're doing, it's on you.
Yeah.
Coach is not going to have any responsibility for it.
Zero.
How do you think that the childhood trauma or stress or everything plays out with players on the field?
So it's difficult because it's for each athlete, the case is completely different, and we can't accept full responsibility for everything that's happening because we can't change the environments they grow up. What we can acknowledge is that there's cultural nuance. People coming from different backgrounds would have different stresses. We can take responsibility for putting systems into place to help them deal with that. There's two cases that you mentioned. One, you said close to retirement, mid-30s. But there's another case where when the athlete's breaking into professionalism. Right. So when an athlete's coming in from that background, it's very, very important for us to have certain psychometric and psychological checks and balances to help them develop positive mental health. That's our full responsibility. if an athlete's got to an end of a career at 35, 40, that means he's already been a professional athlete for 15 to 20 years, right? Surely enough, he's made enough money, right, to understand that I should put certain interventions in place to take care of that health.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that end of the spectrum, I'd like them to take more responsibility for their own mental health, understanding fully that my mental health is impacting the way I parent and the way I have a partner too, wherever I'm with.
Yeah.
Right. And on the other side of the spectrum, I want us to accept more responsibility for putting healthier systems in place because it's critically important, you know?
How important is your family and your friends and your inner circle to the time when you're absolutely being decimated from all fronts?
Kunal,
From your
it's not-
team,
Yeah.
from your fans, from everyone. Your news, social media, everything is just coming down on you hard. And it's at that time when you need those few people who anchor.
You know, few people that anchor is good, but in any aspect in life, you are directly proportional to the people who are giving you advice. You know, if you have a person who's emotional and can't think clearly and can't make you take a step back from the situation, you will make grave mistakes in every aspect of life. If you have a person who has a vested interest in the advice they're giving you all the time, you will make big mistakes. And it's not about athletes, it's about anything. Whether you're going through a divorce, whether you're trying to start a new business, whether you're having conflict in your team, with your leader, in any situation, right? You're directly proportional to the people in your ecosystem that give you advice. And you said something important. How important is it to have those people who got your back? Having people who got your back is 50%. Having people who are competent who have your back is the other 50%.
Right.
Because if you have an incompetent person who will stand by your side through thick and thin and encourage you to do stupid things, you are damn well, yeah, you know. So I ask them to evaluate the competency of the people you're dealing with. You know, so ask them, like, you know, like, do these people advise in these situations on a day-to-day basis? You know, how much of what's their body of experience around this? You know, if you're getting financial advice from a family member who doesn't do this and can't even rub two pennies together, you're not going to get a good
You're not,
decision.
yeah.
If you're going to get advice from the agent who's trying to make commission every time, you're not getting good advice, you know. So if that is important, then leverage your ecosystem to get the right person whose bread and butter depends on that advice. This is what you need to do.
You know why I asked this question? Because this just suddenly came to me and it was looping back to the rules of the BCCI that has just put in about your partners coming with you on tour and that much of time. I feel like at that time when the noise outside is so great, your partner or your child or your this, these are the people who will actually take you away from the constant chatter because when you're in the team, you're playing, you come back to the hotel, you're constantly in that ecosystem.
It's a double-edged sword, Kunal. It's a double-edged sword. You're 100% right. You know, you cannot put a rule in place to think of situations that could arise for individual people, firstly. The second thing I can say is that I have experienced full well the benefit of having my partner in the team and seeing the impact on players. I've also experienced the distraction of having a person because every single night I can't take them for team dinners. I can't take them everywhere the group is, boys. So I'm isolated because I'm doing things by myself with them.
Right.
You know, and stuff like that. Or they are going out themselves. And if they are going out with the group of girls, then I'm not resting because I'm not sure if they're safe. So it's a double-edged sword, you know. So I understand why the rules come in. I'm not understanding what was the problem to bring that rule in. Perhaps if we had context around that, we can understand the thinking. But it's a double-edged sword with both. And really and truly, it's not the responsibility of the association to mandate this. It's the responsibility of the team to control that. It's a team thing, not an association decision.
Human mind is very fickle. It is very easy to slip into a negative narrative because that somehow becomes a comfort zone because like you said, you're a goat, then it's 30% of what you're experiencing. There's 70% of failure and toughness and you know, a lot of problems that you're facing. Hence that 70% also kind of becomes your safe space because you live there a lot. How do you probably change the narrative in your head to bring the balance from the 70% to the 30% and you concentrate on that so that you can move ahead?
Super, great question. Firstly, even if it was 99% positive and 1% negative, the brain's default mechanism is to focus on the one. Because our brain's entire purpose in life is not to make you win, but to make you survive. It's not in the business of thriving, it's in the business of survival. So it's trying to highlight threats. Now, if I push you down a dark street that's very dark and you don't have any spotlights, your survival mechanism kicks in. Your senses get heightened to any noise, anything in the environment that could be a potential threat. Why? Because your brain's job is to keep you alive. So similarly, its job is biologically to highlight threats and bring those threats to the forefront of it.
Right.
The thing is that a negative voice in your mind is not as big a threat as your brain creates it to be. So the way we need to do it is to reframe it. So for example, if you get out for a duck, your brain perceives that as perhaps a threat or a failure, but it's not actually a threat or a failure. It's just part of the process. The language we use is critically important with how you reframe that. So reframing is a critical word in psychology and neurobiology, because a lot of times we use words and we don't understand the implications of it. And if that same word is being used and has a negative connotation to it, then your brain will loop that in all the time. So how do you switch and focus on that 30%?
Yeah, how do you tell your brain to just shut up when it's thinking wrong and say that, hey, this is just momentary, it's not permanent?
Well, it will be thinking about the result if you make the result the most important thing. If you make the process the most important thing, then it won't be focusing on the result at all. And this is byproduct of practice. So you have to teach your brain to constantly evaluate everything through practice. So for example, as a cricketer, if you went and you ticked every box in practice, you had a good session, you did everything, and you got out for a duck, then you can't beat yourself down because you've stuck to a process. One of the most important things that people cannot distinguish is between what is a bad win and what is a good loss. Not a good win, a bad win, and a good loss. So what's the difference?
Can you explain that a little more?
Yes. So a bad win is when you've not ticked all the boxes of process. You've not slept well, you've not had good practice, you've not watched your videos, you went out there, you played a few shots, you've done something, you got lucky, the team won, you scored a few runs. Right, that is a bad win because you didn't stick to a process and you learned nothing from that. A good loss is when you have a very, very titrated process. You've been at every practice, you've slept well, the physiological data is good, the ball's feeling well, and you get out there and, perhaps the ball hits a spot or you get an absolutely unplayable ball and you get out for a duck. That's a good loss. Right. Why is that a good loss? Because you got a process that you stuck to and you trusted, and someone did something. It was an outlier data point that produced that result. Distinguishing in your life the difference between a bad win and a good loss will help you distill your process down. Once you start to amplify your process, then you cannot fail,
Yeah, when you're saying that, it takes me back to, chess right now, Gukesh.
Yes.
I think he's done remarkable. And I really want to understand at that young age, what must be his coaching like and what must be his mindset when he's sitting at that level, playing World Championship and winning. There's one small example that I read. He chose the biggest chair in the game.
Yeah.
Just to, to feel like he's on top of it.
Yeah.
So I want to understand what must be going through Gukesh's mind.
Yeah. So chess is a really interesting sport through the lens of India. The reason why I say that is we probably have more than, I think, 40 grandmasters in India. Some of them as early as 16, 17. Gukesh was 19. If you look at any other sport outside of cricket, we don't have any results that are comparable to that. If you look at grandmaster being at the highest level in that sport. And I always use this as an example, firstly, before I even answer your question. I tell them, if you look at Indians, we have succeeded in almost every ecosystem outside of India purely on our ability to cognitively find smart solutions and outthink someone. We have a smart solution and then we attribute work to it and then we execute it along that day. Now, does it surprise you that outside of cricket, our best performing sport in the country is chess because it's a cognitively dominant sport. We're leaning into our strengths. Every other sport, we're not. So firstly, Gukesh doing this here is playing into what could be our genetic and neurobiological strength. We need more data on that there. But we have significant data to show that, yes, something is working and we are playing in an area that we're very, very good. That's why we're producing stars as early as 18, okay, in a country where we're not producing anything else at that age.
Absolutely.
When it comes to the mindset of someone like this, yes, he would have been coached into things like big chairs, things like the posture that you do, how you go in. All of these things are tiny attributes that contribute to your confidence, contribute to your competence, and do that. But it's also a byproduct of being in the flow. You know, in that moment, he would not have been thinking too much. Most cricketers are not thinking too much. When a Virat walks out to bat or Rohit Sharma walks on, he's not thinking about my past results. He's trying to just be in the flow.
In the moment.
He's not trying to amplify his confidence, because trying to raise my confidence is moving me out of the mind frame that I need to, which is focus on what I need to do.
Right.
You know, anything that moves you out of where you need to be is a distraction. So you'll notice that even in that game, they got to a stage where in the final, when he realized what the outcome was going to be, he could have seen that a few steps before, but he was in the flow in there. It really only hit him much later. So champions are people who can distill their mind into what needs to be done. They're not looking 10 steps ahead, they're looking one step ahead. They have an ability to understand where the game is going, they have an ability to understand the direction they need to take it, but they're evaluating execution here and now. And one thing that we coach in psychology is that a highly, highly positive and overconfident mind is as big a distraction as a mind that's labored by fear and anxiety. Both positive and negative can be equally distracting. This is why we want to distill everything down to now. So what Gukesh did is absolutely extraordinary, you know, and he would have been coached, he would have been trained. And remember, it's a byproduct of process. So even though he's 19 years old, he's been playing the sport for 15 years, right? Any one of the people listening to us who does anything for 15 years will produce the same level of excellence, because we know that. That's just how mastery is built.
So cricket as a sport started off with Test, and then it came down to ODI, and now it's 20 overs. Do you think it is helping them become better at their craft, or is it just like it's entertainment?
Yeah, and you've seen that, you know, Karun Nair just scored 750 in the Vijay Hazare competition, averaging 750. You know, 500s, 250s, and he was not selected in the team. So it highlights how much importance we give to these other tournaments. The other thing about the Indian national team is that these are contracted players. So if they're contracted players, that means that if they're out of form, we still have to play them. Indian national team is not selected on the most informed players. We have A, B, C contracts, and our contract players are the ones who are selected, with a small percentage that gets selected outside of that, you know, because they play 365 days a year for the nation, you know. So we must understand that, you know, the national team is not selected on best form. We're not necessarily pulling the highest wicket taker or highest run scorer in any competition into the national team as incentive. We have contracted players and we stick to that, and that's what a team is. You have a responsibility and you have to figure it out if things are not working out.
How do you think is the transition from being a IPL player to a ODI player or a Test player?
I think it's closer at IPL than it is in any other domestic cricket globally. You know, I feel Ranji, Vijay Hazare are miles away from international competition. I feel even South Africa, domestic cricket is very, very far from international. The IPL is the closest mirror. And earlier on, we are talking about IPL, we're talking about different. It's very important to understand Test cricket, 50 overs, and don't see them as the same game or the same sport. They may be cricket, but they're completely different games. The psychology of how you coach it and how you play it is very, very different, you know. And once you approach them through that lens there, you can evaluate things better.
We're off topic a little bit because you mentioned apartheid.
Yes.
I want to understand, what was it like back then and what effect did it have on you? Because knowing that there is something that you want, like we spoke earlier, like the cognitive thinking of a human brain is happening because everything else is telling you no.
Yeah.
No, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. The only thing which no one can control is what's going on here.
Yeah, 100%.
Because no one needs to know it.
Yeah.
And you're feeling absolutely free here. And at that time, when you are when your environment around you is telling you you cannot. And at that time, developing something and sticking to it. What was it like?
As an Indian person growing up, you had certain education pathways that were only open. You could do law, you could do accounting, and you could do a little bit of engineering. Education was the big one. But you didn't have every option. These were it. Done. We probably had only one university at that time that was taking people of color. It was very difficult because, like you said, the entire ecosystem is telling you no. So the apartheid, firstly, when you're in an oppressed ecosystem, it teaches you to work harder than you've ever had to work. It teaches you learn very quickly, I've got to do 10 times more than the next person if I want the same opportunity. So you cultivate a work ethic that's second to none. The second thing is you park any distraction or any noise, you park it to the side because it doesn't matter. There's nobody there who's listening to any of that. So if you want to be there and if you want to succeed, you really learn to filter the noise out and really focus. The third thing that it does is you learn very quickly that there's nobody that's carrying your placard of support. You have to develop the inner confidence and the courage to speak for yourself. You are your own best brand ambassador, right? So if you sit in the shadows waiting for someone to notice you, no one's coming. No one's knocking. No one's pulling you up saying, hey, you've worked really hard. We're going to give you this opportunity.
Yeah.
So these are all of the beautiful things that you learn and that oppression sort of cultivates in you. But the thing that broke me the most, because there was a period of time when I stepped away from sport for 4 years and I lived in a temple full time. The thing that broke me was that in an oppressed environment, the apartheid gave a few people of color an opportunity. I was one of those. So I got the opportunity to work with state level teams and stuff like that. But as that person was given the opportunity, I was also given the responsibility to take away opportunities from other people of color. I had to press them down. So this is what happens in an oppressed environment. Whether you see it in a workspace where a type of person, maybe from a certain spectrum or a certain gender is given an opportunity, they become the gateway to prevent others from that same position from coming up.
So it's like firing the bullet off your shoulder.
Firing the bullet off your shoulder. So that, when I learned what happened and what was happening and what they were using me for, I was very young. I was 21 years old. I couldn't live with myself, So I took a step back and I moved into the temple. And
What was that like?
The temple was incredible.
Where was that? But
in Durban,
Durban.
at the Hare Krishna temple. Kunal, that was like a learning of another. I moved from a world of sport where you're partying, doing everything. Now in the temple, you sleep at 8, wake up at 3:30. I learned the power of the ecosystem. We speak a little bit about that. The only reason I could wake up every day at 3:30 is because I'm in a room with 20 other brahmacharis who are all waking up. They're kicking you in the morning as you're going. You can't be awake, And even if you don't feel like going, the mind plays games. You're like, everyone's going to notice I'm the only guy not there. And, you get out there. So it cultivates a discipline. And I learned in those 4 years that, everyone talks about discipline. And I came up with the saying that discipline has to break you before it makes you. Right. So what does that mean? That means you have to stick to something for such a prolonged period of time, you don't even know where the end is. And even irrespective of what state of mind you are, what your body's feeling, you repeat. It literally breaks you down before the power of that exercise actually makes you and you learn the power of discipline. And I tell people, if you want to change, right, you have to do something where you have zero line of sight of when that ends. If you say I'm doing a 30-day challenge, your brain is strong enough to motivate for 30 days, for 100 days, for 300 days. It is. You have to do something with no line of sight. That is when discipline's truly cultivating you from the inside.
All your neurons start firing in a different direction.
Different direction, yeah.
Absolutely lovely. I think we've unlocked a lot of data and a lot of learning from you, Shayamal. Thank you so much for coming on Unlock with Kunal Jaisingh. I think this is a very value-creating episode that we've done, and hopefully the future sports stars that are there today trying to, hone their skill will take away a lot from you, and we're going to see budding talent in the future that's coming out.
No worries. Thank you so much, Kunal. I thoroughly love the conversation. I hope everyone listening learned something, and wish you everything on the best on your show, and I'll be watching and listening for sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shayamal.
Take care.
cricket is ingrained in Indian society very deeply. Everyone loves cricket, and it's through cricket where the entire country feels one and proud, and the euphoria of cricket is something else, and we've all experienced it. Today's podcast was with one person who has closely worked with the Indian cricket team, has understood the dynamics of what goes on within the team and how they think and how they process things. And I really hope you enjoyed this episode, and I really hope you all got some in-depth understanding of how the cricket team functions, how India's cricket team functions. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode, and if you all did, please subscribe to my channel, like this video, and share this video with at least 2 people so that they also get some more knowledge and unlock a lot of things that were going on in this episode. Thank you for watching Unlock with Kunal Jaisingh. See you all next time.